Welcome. We've got already 4 new people on the call, and it's trickling in at super fast speeds. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Um, we're going to give it an extra minute or two. Y'all are, 1 minute early, which I love the early birds. And we want this to be engaging and interactive. We want to make sure that you feel part of this fireside chat panelist discussion. And we're going to start off with a quick little icebreaker. So if any of y'all want to engage in the chat and share with us where you're calling in from today, that would be awesome. And we're going to get started in just a minute. Welcome, Ali, Amelia, Annie, Anthony, Beth, Blix. Blix is it's a unique name. I've never heard of that name. Blix, where are you from? Bonnie, Katerina, Christine, Crystal. Ooh, and the cities are coming through. We got Tiff from Queens, New York. Sally from New Jersey. Did I pronounce your name correctly, Sally? I would love some feedback on that. Anthony from New Hampshire. We got Florida, San Francisco, Northern Virginia, New Jersey, Dallas, another floody Florida, which Nancy, I am with you. I am in floody Florida as well. I'm in Miami and oof, I haven't left the house. It's been ugly out there. Got Manhattan. And is it Plano or Piano? I can't see, my chat's a little small. Plano, Texas? I don't know where that is. Washington, DC, Minneapolis. We've got a diverse crowd already. Got people all over the place. Palm Springs, California with a sweaty face. Nicole, is it really hot out there? What's the weather like? Awesome. Well, we have a really rich itinerary with y'all today, so we want to dive straight into it. So hello and welcome, everyone. We're thrilled to have you join us today for our webinar on creating change, DEI strategies for cultivating inclusive workplaces. My name is Lee Rubin. I'm going to be your host for today. And whether you're joining us from your office, home, or even on the go, we're just delighted to have you listening in and being a part of this conversation. In today's super fast-paced world, just staying informed and up to date is more critical than ever. And just kudos to you all for caring about DEI efforts in your own organization and wanting to educate yourself. We've got 3 amazing panelists here who are going to share their insights and all of the important tips, latest insights, in-depth knowledge with y'all that they've seen from supporting the biggest, brightest companies in the world. And these expert speakers are just going to share their valuable perspectives and hopefully give you some opportunity to also ask some questions yourselves. So before we get started, I'll just go over some super quick housekeeping items. But one of them is today's session is being recorded, and the recording will be available to you all after the event. So don't worry if you miss anything or have to hop off or want to take notes. You can always revisit this content later. The second thing is we encourage you to interact with us throughout the session. So you can submit your questions at any time in the Q&A box, and we will address them during the Q&A segment, which is going to be allocated at the end of the event, which I'll share with you a little bit more about what the agenda is going to be like. And then lastly, if you have any technical difficulties, just use the chat function to reach out to our support team. We have Natalia here, who is our marketing assistant. She will be happy to help point you in the right direction on how to potentially address the issue. We're not fully tech support here, but we're here to try. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump straight into the agenda. We're going to do a quick little 5-minute of welcome and introductions, and then we're going to dive straight into the panel discussion where we have a handful of different questions. And as I mentioned, we're going to try to leave that to around 20-25 minutes, giving about 5 to 10 minutes at the end for Q&A for any pressing questions that y'all potentially have top of mind. So I'll start first with my introduction just to get this party started. But I'm Lee. I am your host for today. As I mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO over at Confetti. That's with confetti.com. I'm one of the world's experts on employee culture and event planning, especially virtual team building. And my company, Confetti, if y'all haven't heard of it, we have over 8,000 customers. We worked with companies like Google and Facebook in improving their company culture. And in a nutshell, Confetti is the easiest way to discover, plan, and book unforgettable virtual and hybrid employee experiences. Everything from hosted games to shippable classes. It's the only platform that takes care of the entire event planning process end to end with a happiness policy and truly has something for everyone. And just a fun little tip for y'all. Not a tip, it's more like a something personal about me, but I am 8+ months pregnant. So if you hear me hiccuping or gasping for air, just know that is a typical pregnant symptom. And I appreciate y'all bearing with me as I just, bring human life apparently into this world. Naomi, maybe you can go first. Would you kindly share a little bit about yourself to the audience?
Yeah, of course. I think I'm now going to follow that format. So, welcome everyone. My name is Naomi Sterling. She, her. I am a DEI consultant at Paradigm. Paradigm is a DEI strategy consulting firm, and we offer both products and services that support organizations across different industries with their DEI strategy and learning approach. Um, I don't do well with fun facts, but I like to say that my fun fact is that I'm a native New Yorker. So I saw some New Yorkers in the room. Hello, everyone. I also saw some familiar names in the room. Welcome. And I really feel as though I'm a people enthusiast. People and culture is really where I thrive. I come to this work with an HR background. And so really, I've always been interested in what makes the workplace somewhere where people want to be, where people enjoy sort of giving their best. And that's what I hope to share with you all today.
Awesome. Peter, you're up next.
Hi there, Peter Phelan. My fun fact, I'll lead with it, originally from Ireland, but now a very happy New Yorker for the last 29 years. And yeah, my background is in people and culture like Naomi. I did a master's in that back home in Ireland, and then was lucky enough to get a green card and have been doing it in the States ever since, 20 years in-house, and now 8 years as a culture doctor, this profession I invented for myself, where I get to do my favorite bits of the, at times, overwhelming chief people officer role. And yeah, always loved creating, helping curate positive places to work. And now I do that as a consultant. Place a lot of great kind of belonging oriented chief people officers, and also happy to and proud to be on the advisory board for Dandy, which is a great solution in sort of the data side of DEI and beyond.
Awesome. And Tamara.
Thank you so much, and welcome everybody. My name's Tamara Thorpe, and I am calling in today from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I reside on the traditional home of the Sandia Pueblo and Navajo Nation. I want to just let you all know that I'm really excited to be here today. Similar to Naomi and Peter, I do a lot of work in the organizational space around culture. I've been best known as the Millennials Mentor, and today I'm the founder of Real Mentors Network. We're an online platform designed to create equitable access to mentors for professionals. And so today I hope to share a little bit about my experience. Similar to Lee, been able to work with large companies, Fortune 500, 100 companies around their diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. And I'll hope to be able to share a little bit about that with you all today.
Awesome. Well, why don't we stick with you for question number one? And just starting off with, how do you define diversity, equity, and inclusion? And what is the role of DEI in today's workplace in your eyes?
So I think defining diversity, equity, inclusion, I think lots of folks may have different definitions or use sort of different synonyms. But really, I think what's important today for organizations to focus on is what they're doing to create inclusive cultures where people feel a really strong sense of belonging. There are a lot of different um, things that are driving DEI initiatives, organizations, whether they're external factors, things that are happening in the world, along with the internal factors of people within organizations who are wanting to see change, wanting to see their workplace a place that aligns with their values and a place where they can be as close to their authentic self as possible. And so for me, I think when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, it's been my experience that we're talking about increased representation at all levels of the organization. And that's a representation of people who look like not only the country we live in, the communities we live in, but also the customers and clients that we serve. I think those are critical parts of the role that diversity, equity, and inclusion plays in organizations today.
Awesome. Peter, Naomi, do you have anything that you want to add?
I'll say, +1, +1, +1 on all the points that Tamara said. Really sum things up pretty well. Maybe just another way of phrasing might be, removing kind of friction to belonging. So kind of weeding out anything that's getting in the way of a level playing field and place where people can thrive and do their best work and feel safe in so doing. Yeah.
I'll just add maybe from the operational perspective, something that we like to say is that inclusive leadership is effective leadership. And I really think diversity, equity, and inclusion now and going forward is really just a way to exercise your people strategy to help everyone reach the goals of the organization. Ultimately, I think a DEI strategy is something that enables you to get to your goals. And I think it's important that we continue to kind of break apart the acronym of DEI so that people can really understand the intention of what we're talking about when we mention diversity, equity, and inclusion. It can get murky definitions out there. So this is a great question. And I think it's important that all organizations really be intentional about how they define each one of those and how it applies to the way that they work.
Love that. We do have our first attendee that raised their hand to talk. We have Kate Healy, but if y'all are okay with it, there is a Q&A function in Zoom. If you look, I think it usually just says literally Q&A. Would be amazing if you can put your questions in there just for an initial filter and starter, and we'll have a little review and be able to kind of answer that at the end. So appreciate your cooperation on that. Thank you so much for just engaging, Kate. So kudos to you. Really, really happy that you're utilizing that because we want y'all to be able to answer your most pressing questions. Awesome. We're going to move on to the second question then. So what strategies have you implemented for fostering a culture of inclusion and belonging within teams and organizations? And I hope that the strategies that y'all share are really going to be practical things that the attendees can really take away something. So we'll just mix things up. We'll start with Naomi and then work our way over to Peter and then Tamara.
Practical tips are my favorite. So there are so many things, of course, so many strategies that you can use to implement a culture of inclusion and belonging. I think one of the sort of really impactful and easy moments to begin to dig into this is when people are new to an organization or people are new to a team. How you structure that onboarding, how you welcome people in, how you get people connected. I think taking the time to really identify what are going to be those resources that individual needs to be connected to right off the bat. How do you make sure that person is introduced to the different team members or they're introducing themselves? Maybe you have a buddy program. I know some organizations do, but really being intentional about that experience, that new hire experience or that new team member experience. We like to say that in those moments, belonging uncertainty is at its highest. And so making sure that you have a plan, which some organizations I think have gotten a lot better at, and some organizations are still chugging away at. If you do have those plans, making sure that people are using them consistently, especially new managers, folks who haven't been a part of this process before, they have access to what that looks like and how to implement it on their teams.
Awesome. Thank you. Peter.
Yeah, lots of plus ones there. Just take that as read. I'm honored to be on this group. Every answer I'll be starting with plus ones in my head. I come at this from a little bit of a different angle these days. I used to be an in-house, chief people officer, and was very proud of winning Great Places to Work awards and things like that, and for the safe, productive spaces we created. But now I'm kind of a little bit on the side. I support lots of growing tech companies who have very small people teams and maybe rely on partners, vendors, consultants, to kind of force multiply their little team of one or two into a full-fledged people and talent function. So my tip is select those vendors and partners carefully, so that they are kind of DEI aware, and that's maybe built into their DNA, so that you're not having to educate your vendor partners on this stuff. They're kind of already there with you just from the vendor selection process. So say on the people analytics side, Dandy, who I mentioned earlier, it's dandy.com. Just they were born out of DEI initiatives. They do a whole lot more now, but their kind of raison d'etre was that it was hard to solve DEI problems or spot trends or diagnose things without really deep data analysis. So they did this amazing platform. It's been around for years, and now they're doing way more beyond DEI. So it's kind of like if you came out of DEI, that's a great start. And so think about that as you select who's helping you.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of follow up on what Peter said, mentioned data. And so for me, I think it's really important that any DE&I strategy begins with data. And so I think assessment has to be sort of a key component at the beginning of any initiative that organizations are putting into place, so that they have a baseline, right? We know where we're starting. And that really sets organizations up to be able to measure the impact of any of the strategies that they put into place. And so very often, to Peter's point, organizations will bring in external consultants like the three of us, but there's also already a lot of internal data that organizations can use to assess where they are, what their starting point is. And so whether that's their own employee engagement and satisfaction surveys, performance review, any data they have on their employee demographics, all of that really is a sort of information you can use. And then of course bringing in support to conduct interviews, do additional surveys, focus groups, etc. But I think any DE&I strategy should begin with data and having that information, because that's going to be really key both to the implementation and then the final assessment at the end.
So I'd love to stick with that and ask, so how do you measure the effectiveness of these DEI initiatives, and what are the 2 to 3 KPIs or key metrics that you think an organization should track to really gauge that progress? And Tamara, maybe you can go first.
Yeah, I think that one, it has to sort of, you have to start with the end in mind, right? Those are sort of one of those best practices for any leader or any strategy that we put into place. And so when we can sort of know from the beginning what it is we want to accomplish, that then tells us exactly what we're going to be measuring. And so I think that there are some different ways that we can measure success, whether we're looking at recruitment and retention numbers, whether we're looking at employee engagement or satisfaction numbers. also, if organizations set some goals on increasing diversity and representation in management and leadership, those are things that they can also measure. But I think for me, what's really at the core of creating inclusive organizations and cultures of belonging is shifting mindsets and behaviors. And those can be a bit more difficult to measure when we're measuring human behavior. And so, again, that comes back to kind of collecting some of that qualitative data around the employee experience. But I think for me, what I would share with organizations is that before you begin anything, to know what you want to accomplish and identify as early as you can how you want to measure the outcomes.
That's really amazing advice. Naomi, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yes, of course. I love talking about data. I'm so happy we're on the topic. I completely agree with sort of having a goal in mind. And I also think it's important to, even if you have a goal in mind, but you have no baseline, if you haven't collected or analyzed the data yet, we'll start there. So some of the things that I am always advising organizations to do is really think about collecting data by demographic group. I think organizations shy away from that, looking at your attrition rate by demographic group, your promotion rate, your new hires by demographic group, because that's going to tell you whether people are having different experiences based on their demographics, which of course is sort of core to understanding that employee experience and creating DEI efforts or initiatives that are going to be impactful. I also say don't underutilize your engagement survey data. In fact, you want to collect demographic data there as well. Sometimes people anonymize the data so much or aggregate it so much that it tells a certain story, but it might not be the story you need to hear as an organization. So just because an aggregate 95% of everyone says they're engaged, if that's only 15% of caregivers at your organization are engaged, it's a really different story. There's something happening for that group that maybe isn't reflected in that aggregate data. And so you want to be mindful about how you're reading the data, how you're collecting and analyzing it, so you can really structure your initiatives or efforts to have the right impact.
I would love to just double click on that for just a sec. But are these like what tools do you use, or how do you utilize actually collecting this information? And is there anything that we need to be mindful of, like not asking, and does it have to be anonymous? And if it is, like, is the survey mandatory? Share with us a little bit more about how to do this, because I think a lot of companies like want to know this information, but they're a little shy on making sure that they're in compliance on how to really extract this data.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, Naomi, you can go first.
One of the things I think everyone should utilize is their HRIS system, their ATS system. Most of the time, I recommend to organizations to just have folks run a self-ID campaign at your organization, which is really where people will voluntarily provide their demographic data. The important thing about collecting this data, I think the reason people shy away from it is because they presume that there's going to be a perception about why they're asking for the data. So be really clear about your own why. Be really transparent. Why are you collecting this data? How are you planning on using it? Make sure that you attach all of that explanation and transparency to your actual DEI initiatives, efforts, the progress that you want to make. Get people to buy into the fact that you do genuinely care about their experience and you want to make sure you're providing the best workplace for everyone. That's why you're asking for the data, so you can begin to track your progress as an organization. But I think don't shy away from it. Be transparent and upfront about your why everywhere that you're collecting that data. If it's candidate data, put it there in the application. If it's employee data, you can even leverage some of your employee resource groups to support people in understanding why you're asking for that data and how it will be helpful for them. Provide spaces where people can ask questions so they feel comfortable engaging in self-ID. And you already have the systems to collect the data. You just need the engagement.
Love that. Anyone want to add anything to what Naomi just answered or the previous questions regarding how to measure the effectiveness of DEI initiatives and the KPIs?
I'll just say, lots of plus ones on Naomi's points. The self ID campaign, super effective. Like any people team is sitting on a wealth of data in their, HRIS and their ATS, like every promotion, every internal mobility, every termination, so much in there. So if you can get your demographic data on top of that, then you can really tell the stories of what's happening. Are you doing a great job at maybe getting diverse entry-level candidates, but it's the breakdown occurs on promotion, or whatever the case may be. But, sunlight is kind of the best disinfected data is just the key. And then you can, hopefully, continue to build the goodwill by being transparent with the same folks who you kind of maybe had go out on a limb and go on faith, and share their data with you. If you follow up every 3-6 months with progress reports, then I think that trust can only build.
Love it. Peter, let's stick with you for a second, but in your experience, what are some of the common challenges or obstacles that organizations face when trying to advance their DEI efforts, and how can they overcome them?
Yeah, so I think really getting those definitions right is key. Sadly, in 2024, just the 3 letters that DEI is so loaded and misunderstood and politicized, and it's quite unfortunate. So I think translating the desire to have a safe workplace where which reflects the populations you serve and the customers you have and wants there to be no friction to success suddenly begins to make a bit more sense than this politicized acronym. So I'd say, try and get the language into your own company vernacular, tied into your values. Hopefully the potential is there for it to fit with the values you've already, articulated as a business. And then, I'll go back to the vendor partner thing. Overcoming challenges can include not adding to your challenges by partnering with leaders or vendors who don't get it. So choose those wisely. With key hires, a lot of my clients are in the tech space, and they've been, they're looking for their head of people, and they come to me kind of sheepishly saying, yeah, all of our executive team is male, and, maybe all Caucasian male. And so please help us, make the first step here with somebody who's going to be a more welcoming face to other demographics as we try and recruit and grow. So not all of them are in that bad of a situation, but some are. And then others don't even ask necessarily for that kind of diverse pipeline, but I give it to them anyway. Because I'll try and be part of the solution, even before the problem is articulated. But yeah, I'd say choose folks for key positions who will be a friction remover versus a friction adder.
Anyone want to add anything before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I would just say, I think to one of the points that are made is sometimes organizations can be their own worst enemy in trying to advance their own strategies. And so I think it's important that they're really honest with themselves about what they really want to get out of a DE&I initiative. If the idea is that it's going to be a checkbox, then it's probably not worth their time and energy. But if organizations really are seeking to shift the culture within their organization, because when DE&I B work or JEDI work, whatever acronym we use, is done and done well, it is about shifting the culture of the organization, not just instituting a singular practice or establishing ERGs. It's really about changing the culture, and that really requires buy-in from across the organization and committing to a long-term strategy to do that. So I think there's an opportunity for organizations when they're thinking about putting in some DE&I strategies or taking inclusion seriously, that they're very honest with themselves about who they are, and who they want to be and where they're willing to create change.
Awesome. Nate, if you want to add anything before we go on, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, maybe I'll start with you for the next question.
I'll just say to follow along with what's being shared already. I see a lot of maybe new managers or managers who are new to organizations who aren't getting the resources and support that they need to follow through on some of the initiatives that organizations put in place. And I think that's where you can really find things faltering at the sort of middle management level, or sort of maybe we have our DEI champions at the top and we have our enthusiasts at the bottom, and then we have this middle level where it's just not getting where it needs to go. And so not forgetting those folks, really include them, enable them to move things forward, make sure that as people are joining the organization, you really and truly loop them in, because those are the folks who are probably feeling the most pressure to get this right from both sides. So giving them the right support, I think, is critical.
Well, Naomi, maybe you can share what your opinion is on like discussing the role of leadership in driving the DEI efforts, and just what qualities or actions you think make a leader effective in this space.
Yeah, I think, of course, leaders championing DEI is super important in organizations. I think folks will really begin to question the authenticity of your efforts if they don't see a leader's presence, or if they only hear it from the DEI team or the one DEI manager. Of course, they know that person is doing good work, but they don't see it reflected from the leader. They don't believe that their leader is bought in. They don't believe that it's really embedded in the organization. So leaders play a huge role in that. And I think some of the actions that leaders take that show that they're committed or that they're involved is really, one, talking about DEI, making it a regular talking point when you speak to your people, getting engaged in some of those events that take place, especially if you have employee resource groups who are putting in a lot of time and effort to organize these events. Leaders showing up to those really shows a level of commitment. It also models that behavior for others. But of course, as I was saying before, I think sometimes leaders hesitate to jump in because they don't have the support that they need to have difficult conversations, or they don't feel comfortable admitting that they may not know enough about this topic or another topic. So really creating, I think, as was mentioned, a culture where people can say, I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn from everyone here. And leaders also embracing that, right? Sometimes we want to just be the expert on everything, but we're not, and we're people, and that's okay. And so creating a culture where it is okay to say, I'm attending this event because I know I'm not the expert and I want to learn more, and I want to be able to be a champion that really supports different individuals and their needs.
Love it. Tamara, you want to add anything before we move on?
Yeah, I think Naomi said a few really important things. One, that having that buy-in from the top, and most importantly, that those leaders are visible and vocal in their commitment to DE&I. It is not enough that they've signed off, that they've approved a budget. They need to be really actively engaged in communicating their vision for how they see the organization shifting. And it's something that I encourage clients to do all the time, that when there is a buy-in initiative with the leaders, that the next step then is for leaders to be vocal and visible about both the organization's commitment and then their own personal learning journey. None of us come into this work getting it right from the start. And I've been doing this work for over 20 years, and I still make mistakes. And so part of doing this work is leaning in to the discomfort and the vulnerability that we're all learning and growing in this journey together. And so I think that that's essential, along with really supporting that middle management group of leaders who are often feeling a significant amount of pressure from the top and the bottom, and also then feeling sort of under-resourced in terms of having the skill set to really manage the day-to-day DE&I issues that come up. And so really ensuring that comfortable, as well as your HRBPs, really comfortable having those difficult conversations, and not only comfortable, but having comfort because they have the skill set. And so I think those are really critical elements of having effective leadership for a DE&I strategy.
Awesome. We're going to enter the Q&A portion of today's session, and we already have at least two different amazing questions that came on. I'm actually going to merge one of an anonymous attendee said, do you know the best ways to have job descriptions reviewed for inclusivity? And I'm going to merge it with, what are like some of the best practices in general for recruiting and retaining? Well, we'll start with recruiting that diverse talent. And how can we really, make sure that organizations ensure that there are equitable opportunities for all employees? And I guess I have to pick somebody. So Peter, you're off of mute. We're going to pick on you first.
So, yeah, I probably should. I'll be vulnerable for a second. I probably should, as somebody who does executive search work, tap into some technology or partner that's good at checking, the JDs that I'm working with for inclusivity. So if any of the other panelists have a recommendation in a sec when I stop talking after, that'd be great. So, I think that my approach, is definitely to cast a wide net in my own searches, not so much in the job description, but in the practices I take. So I'll be looking for, the skills, and I really won't be, caring about anything else when it comes to finding that best, head of people or head of talent acquisition, head of L&D for my clients. And I'm lucky enough to have, a very diverse network of 30,000 on LinkedIn, and I'm, constantly refreshing that. So yeah, I think casting a wide net is kind of my starting point.
Awesome. We have already some feedback from the chat. I love how people are chiming in, but in case any of y'all missed it, they're saying a tool called text.io reviews job descriptions, content, inclusive language. It's also one of our partners at Paradigm, which Naomi is a part of. And they have a great technology solution for just reviewing job descriptions as well. So I hope that's helpful to whoever asked that question. But Tamara and Naomi, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to of course, the technology is there to help folks with job descriptions and identifying bias. But one of the points that I wanted to make is educating and supporting your hiring managers around the pipeline myth, right? The idea that there aren't enough women or there are people of color, that is mythology, right? The data is in, the talent is there. Organizations have to be really thoughtful and intentional about where they're searching and how they're searching, and developing relationships with institutions and organizations that are really going to help them, to the point that Peter made, cast a wider net. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with folks and they said, well, the talent's just not there. How can we become more diverse and have greater representation? But we know that the talent's there. It's that organizations tend to, one, recruit and promote from within, which can have its benefits, but it can also have its disadvantages. And often they have relationships with organizations and institutions that they've relied on for a very long time that don't necessarily provide them with a breadth of talent. And certainly by having different policies and practices like remote working has certainly helped organizations able to cast a wider net. But there is some education that needs to be done within an organization around sort of demystifying this idea about pipeline and whether talent is actually there, and then providing the support and resources that hiring managers need in order to reach a wider population.
I'll just, highlight and underscore everything Tamara has shared. As you can see in the chat, Paradigm partners with Texio, which is a tech solution for that. As a former recruiter myself, I really love having an opportunity to do Paradigm's inclusive hiring training with HR teams, with recruiting teams, with talent teams. It is one of my favorite conversations because I understand how challenging it is. I understand the pressures. But when, as Tamara was saying, when we really equip people with the right learning, the right tools, the right resources, it becomes a little bit easier. And then, of course, you have to kind of empower those people to be able to pass on that knowledge to their hiring managers, et cetera, et cetera. But the inclusive hiring conversation is one that I really enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you. We have another question here from Jennifer. She says, thank you for today's important presentation. Could you share a specific example of a strategy, a goal, or a data collection method, whichever one you'd like to share, that a company or organization used for analyzing impact on the communities that they served, opposed to the internal focus? Any takers on the question? I know it's hard to be put sometimes on the spot with these. Go for it.
I'll just say I'm a proponent of focus groups, in large part because it's been my experience that focus groups, when they're done by an external partner, people are extremely honest, and you can collect some really specific and data around the experience people are having day to day in an organization. And one of the things that I have found is that in that honesty, there is a real desire for change. Most of the people who opt to participate in a focus group do because they want to be at the organization and they want to see it do better and be better. And I think the hardest part when you collect that data is getting buy-in, is getting leaders to really see what the experience is that their talent is having in organizations. It can be really hard when you're sitting in the C-suite with a large, holding the big picture of the organization, to see what it might be like for someone who is closer to the ground, on the front lines, managing either their own identity within the organization. And so I think that there has been, in my experience, when I've worked with organizations on collecting focus group data, that you get some real clarity on where there are gaps, from how folks in the C-suite see what's happening, how folks on the ground see it, and those then become leverage points and opportunities for change.
Awesome. Naomi, I saw you come off of mute, so I don't know if you wanted to add one last thing or we move on.
I'll just share, thinking about sort of external communities that you might work with, maybe I'll sort of double tap on something that Peter shared, is really thinking about who your partners are. You can honestly look at whether or not you have really had an intentional process around who you've decided to partner with. That, of course, who you partner with has an impact on the external communities that you'll serve. And of course, when you think about just general data collection, we're always a big proponent of surveys, opportunities for folks to provide feedback, making that sort of a multi-step process. So maybe not just one time you're asking for feedback, but embed it in the way that you work with those communities so that there are multiple opportunities to provide feedback. Maybe it's after every bit of programming, maybe it's sort of at a large scale at one point, and then smaller sort of pulse surveys or pulse checks as you're working with those communities. But I think those are some of the ways that you can really grab some of that feedback from external.
Awesome. We have one last question here. We're going to try to do it in a rapid fire answer, so we can try to get everybody out on time. Suryo, I hope I pronounced your name right. Asks, what are 1-2 questions for DEI candidates to ask their interviewers to best gauge the org's enthusiasm and capacity to support their DEI work if hired? Any takers? I know. First come, first serve.
Yeah, I'll say something quick and then let other people add more value. But I've definitely worked on DEI searches for my clients. It sounds like that I'm interpreting this question as being from a DEI professional who's who's applying for a DEI job. I would ask about the history to see just how far along they are on the journey from sort of the unconscious incompetent to the committed learner, see if this is an organization that you're going to be able to meet them where they are. And if that's a place where you're interested in meeting them, if it's just to check the box, it might not be a job worth taking. And then the other one might be budget, just to see what past budget has been committed to programming and general initiatives. If the only budget they have is the modest salary they've allocated for the job and nothing else, maybe run for the hills.
Yeah, I was just going to add asking around their commitment. What have they done and what have been the outcomes, right? Focusing on those KPIs and outcomes with what they've done, and being able to assess how deep and extensive their commitment is to diversity, equity, inclusion.
Just a quick addition, and thinking of maybe just asking, do they have a DEI strategy? Is that something that they have? Have they had one in the past? Has it been a grassroots effort? Has it come from the top? Maybe they're hiring you because they don't have a DEI strategy and you are tasked with building it. So what's the size of the team? Who's supporting you in that effort? Those are some good questions, I think, to gauge.
Well, we have one last question that's snuck into our Q&A, and I'm kind of debating what to do here. For anyone who needs to hop off, thank you so much for just your time today. We are going to just stay to answer that one last question, if it's okay, because they're anonymous and I don't have any other way to answer their question after this. But we hope you find the webinar informative and engaging. Before we conclude, can you all share, if anyone wants to stay in touch with you, what is the best way to get in touch with Naomi or Peter or Tamara?
I'll say LinkedIn. I'm the 30,000 LinkedIn addict, 30,000 contacts. That's number one for me.
Awesome.
I'd say folks can also find me on LinkedIn or tamarathorpe.com or realmentors.net.
Perfect.
LinkedIn for me too, but of course you can also find me at Paradigm. You can even email me. It's Naomi@paradigmiq.com. So that you can feel free to connect with me there.
Amazing. So we'll answer this last question here. So the anonymous attendee says, one thing we, our company's DEI ERG, keep running across is the talk of religion, trying to foster belonging. We don't want to ignore the people who may want it, but there are just as many, if not more, that do not. Psychological safety issues. In your experience, is this an area that is considered part of DEI content/learning? And how should we handle the request to address or speak to religion in our communications or events? It's a fantastic question.
So I'll just start by saying, one, I think organizations need to be much more thoughtful and intentional about including religion as part of their DEI strategy and education and educational initiatives. What we have seen, not only since 9/11, but just since October, an increasing rise in Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in the workplace. And so there are opportunities for including that to shift the experience that folks are having. I know when it comes to whether or not we have ERGs for religious groups, that is something organizations have to consider, and really importantly consider around why we have ERGs. Why do we have ERGs and what's the function of the ERG? And that will determine whether or not an ERG might be an appropriate strategy for religious inclusion. But even prior to the events in October, Resume Builder had done a study 2 years ago and found that 25% of hiring managers won't hire people they perceive to be Jewish. This is a problem. This is a DE&I problem that has to be included and addressed in any organizational DE&I strategy.
Really great. Anyone want to add before we conclude today's chat?
Maybe I'll just share. I completely agree with many of the things that Tamara shared. I think it's important to engage with those folks who are asking for that representation, really understand what their boundaries are with that. Some people maybe want to have some sort of support or resources at work, but don't necessarily want to share their religious identity out with the entire workforce. And so that might change your approach. You might have something a little bit more discreet where people have an opportunity to connect with HR BPs or connect with folks in the organization who can really support them. Maybe they just want a place to share their experiences. I've also heard in recent people thinking about interfaith groups. This is something that I find super interesting and wondering, really, it depends on your organization, who the people are and how they want to connect or how they want to be supported. And that, of course, requires building some connection and trust. But I have been interested in the exploration of when we talk about ERGs, interfaith groups, how can we make sure that everyone has an opportunity if they have a religious affiliation that they'd like to be supported by? How do we make sure that we can support that for everyone?
Really awesome. Well, again, thank you so much to everybody who participated today as an attendee and as a panelist. And it's just a pleasure learning, growing, evolving with you all. And just your commitment to DEI is commendable. And we've got more to learn from y'all. So I'm excited to continue to follow your journeys. And thank you, everybody, again. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.